What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Full 90. I hope you had a pleasant international break. We are back now for some Premier League action. Thank you for clicking on today's video. A like is, of course, always appreciated. I want to give a massive shout out to Samak Inc., who left their score predictions on the Week 8 video for the Premier League. If you want to be shouted out in the next episode, then be sure to leave your predictions for the Week 9 fixtures down in the comments below. Who do you think is going to win? Do you think there'll be any surprise and shock results? I always love seeing that. Are Tottenham going to be able to bounce back from their defeat? Are Man United going to take something from Liverpool? There's a lot of interesting games to watch this coming week. So before we get into Week 9, we're just going to have a quick look back at my Week 8 predictions to see how I got on. Now, Week 7 and Week 6 were my best 2 weeks of the season so far in the Premier League. I had a load of perfect results, perfect scores, that sort of thing. This week wasn't as good, and there were some shock results, so let's go through those real quick. The first one, Brighton versus Tottenham. I got this one about as wrong as you can get. I predicted a 2-0 Tottenham win. Not necessarily convincing, but they would be able to beat Brighton in the way that a top 4 team should be able to do away from home. And Brighton turned it up and beat Tottenham 3-0. And it wasn't even like, the scoreline didn't do, they didn't do Tottenham justice. Similar to the Man United-Chelsea game at the beginning of the season where United won 4-0. I felt like that did Chelsea a little bit of a disservice. That was more like a 2-1, 3-2 win to Man United kind of game. But 3-0 to Brighton in this game really does sum up the game fairly well. Brighton dominated the ball. They had way more shots. They just dominated the game and looked like the top 6 team against Tottenham, which was absolutely phenomenal for them. So Tottenham looking in a little bit of trouble. The Burnley versus Everton game, I predicted a 1-1 draw, and it was actually just a 1-0 win to Burnley. So clinical performance from Burnley, and Everton still struggling going forward to get the goals that they do require. So hopefully for them, they can bounce back this week. And the next game, Liverpool versus Leicester, I predicted a 3-1 win to Liverpool, and it was a dramatic 2-1 win, a late penalty from James Milner, and what a weekend that turned out to be for Liverpool fans, with Everton, Manchester United, Manchester City all losing, and them getting the win against one of the stronger Premier League sides of the season so far in Leicester. The next game, Norwich versus Aston Villa. I went for a 1-1 draw. I feel like Norwich, since the Man City result really, they're starting to get found out a little bit. Aston Villa ran riot and won the game 5-1, so I was definitely wrong there. Watford versus Sheffield United. I predicted a 2-1 win to Watford, and watching the highlights back of that game, I don't think the score prediction would have been too far off, because Watford had so many chances, but like a team that's used to losing, a team that's in the relegation zone, they just couldn't score. They should have done, but the keeper played very, very well for Sheffield United, and it ended in a 0-0 draw. The next game, West Ham versus Crystal Palace, I predicted a 2-1 win to West Ham, and for the first hour of the game, it was looking like that sort of scoreline could happen, and that scoreline did happen in the end, but in the favour of Crystal Palace, thanks to a late comeback and renaissance from Roy Hodgson and his men, keeping them in a very strong position in the Premier League table. The next game, Arsenal versus Bournemouth, I predicted a 3-2 win to Arsenal. Maybe that would have been a better score prediction at the Vitality Stadium as opposed to the Emirates. Arsenal actually managing to hold on to an early 1-0 lead and keeping it that way with the 1-0 win. The wins all count. It was an ugly win, but Arsenal fans will take that. They're up into 3rd position. The next game, Man City up against Wolves, I predicted a 4-1 win. I probably should have done a bit more research on injuries. I didn't know De Bruyne wouldn't be playing, and he commands the ship at the Etihad. And Wolves held Manchester City for over an hour, and then Adama Traore. Oh, Adama Traore. My guy scores 2 goals at the end, which is more than he's scored in like the last 70 appearances he's had, where he's only scored 1 goal. So Wolves won that one 2-0. Fantastic performance from them. Wolves are back, and as a neutral, you gotta love a bit of Wolves. Southampton versus Chelsea, I predicted a 2-2 draw. I thought Chelsea would slip up, but Chelsea are in electric form right now, and they've given Lampard a little bit of time, and they're starting to gel. They're starting to look like a team that could push for the top 4, certainly more than United and Tottenham, that is for sure. And I think 5th place in the table reflects their season so far very well, and it's only going to get better for them. It was a 4-1 win to Chelsea in that one. And the final game, Newcastle versus Manchester United. I don't necessarily know why I predicted United to win when they haven't won an away game since they beat PSG in the Champions League, but I just thought they had to win. They just had to, but they really struggle. Up top, Rashford looks like almost a shadow of his former self. He's just never in the right position. He doesn't look hungry enough, and Newcastle get the 1-0 win. So not the best prediction for me there. Let's see if Week 9 brings a more fruitful week of predictions for me. Kicking it off, we have Everton versus West Ham. Now, Everton, I believe, if they're not in the relegation zone, they're certainly in 17th position, and West Ham are flying quite high in the table despite dropping points to Crystal Palace at home the previous week. And I think Everton have to get a result from this game, and I think West Ham's confidence will be slightly dented because of the previous results. So I'm going to go with Everton to finally get a win at Goodison Park. I think, obviously, Everton tend to come into the league a little bit more towards the latter stages of the season. And although we're not there yet, the worst surely has to have gone for now for Everton, because otherwise they are at risk of getting relegated, and that's just not Everton. It just really isn't. So I'm going to go for a 2-1 win here to Everton in this fixture. The next game is Aston Villa versus Brighton, and I think Brighton, they played very, very well against Tottenham, and they've been playing decent football this season. They should have definitely won against Newcastle when it ended in a 0-0 draw, but they just couldn't get the ball to the back of the net. They are dropping to the bottom part of the table, and you do expect Brighton to finish 15th or below. But I just feel like I just see a draw. Aston Villa coming off a massive win against Norwich. I just feel like there's going to be a draw. If I had to pick a team to win, and I almost did, I would have picked Aston Villa, obviously. At home, they're looking good, but something tells me Brighton are going to set up a bit more defensively, and are going to be able to nick a 1-1 draw in this fixture. So that is the score I'm going for that game. The next game promises to be an exciting one, I think, and that is Bournemouth up against Norwich. Now, similar to how I predicted a 3-2 scoreline between Arsenal and Bournemouth at the Emirates last week, I'm going to go with a 3-2 home win to Bournemouth, because Norwich, obviously, they just conceded 5 goals to Aston Villa, so conceding 3 to Bournemouth away from home isn't too far outside the realm of possibility. But Bournemouth, they can run riot at home, but sometimes they do let in a little bit at the back, so I feel like Norwich could take advantage of that, but I think at home, Bournemouth should be able to get the win. So yeah, as I said, a 3-2 win to Bournemouth in that fixture. The next game, one of the easier ones, in my opinion, to predict. I think my biggest victory of the week is going to go to Chelsea, who are playing up against Newcastle, who came off the fantastic 1-0 win against Manchester United. Steve Bruce's first win against Manchester United in his managerial career in 23 attempts. I'm going for a 3-0 win here to Chelsea, and Tammy Abraham, he's looking really, really good. He's on track to beat Marcus Rashford's highest scoring season probably in the next month, I would say. Maybe even in this game if he scores all 3, which is just phenomenal. So I'm going to go for a 3-0 win here to Chelsea. The next game is Leicester up against Burnley. Now, initially I looked at this, and you think about Leicester's form recently, and perhaps Burnley last year when they weren't doing as well, and it looks like it's got a 2-0 written all over it. But Burnley have been playing a little bit better this season, so I'm going to make it a little bit closer. I think Leicester will be able to bounce back after losing at the last minute to Liverpool, and I think Leicester are going to get the win, but I think it's going to be a very, very close one. I'm going to go for a 2-1 win to the Foxes at the King Power Stadium. Now, the next game, this is an interesting one. It's Tottenham Hotspur up against Watford. Now, obviously, Watford are bottom of the league. They're yet to get a win. They can't seem to find the back of the net, but they still have the same talented players in that squad that they've always had. It's just not quite working at the moment, and part of me wanted to predict some sort of upset here, but I think just based on the turmoil that Tottenham's in, I just can't see it happening. Tottenham will obviously do everything to win this game like they would in any other game, but they really have to win this game. So I'm going to go for a Tottenham win here, a 2-0 win to Spurs. The next game is Wolves up against Southampton. Now, this one, I was going to go for a Wolves home win, but I think Southampton are going to be able to bounce back after getting beaten fairly heavily by Chelsea. And I think it's going to be high scoring, which is an interesting prediction because Wolves games tend to be fairly low scoring. You know, usually 2 goals are scored in Wolves games, 1 or 2 goals. It's not often it goes over 2.5 in a Wolves match, but for this one, I'm going to go for it, and I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw between the two teams, because I think Southampton away, they're going to give themselves license to try and counter-attack, and I think Wolves are also going to try and attack, obviously being the home side, so I think that could lead to goals at both ends. So I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw in this one. Now, the next game is Crystal Palace up against Man City. We know that last season, Crystal Palace, I think, were the first team to deliver an upset to Man City, but I believe they won, was it 3-2? And I believe that was also the game of the Andros Townsend screamer when he scored that goal against Man City. I don't think Crystal Palace will have the same fortunes here. Obviously, Manchester City just lost to Wolves, so they're going to try and come back with a vengeance. And similarly, when Manchester City lost to Norwich, they came back the week after and beat Watford 8-0. I'm not going to go for a high-scoring one like that, but it is still going to be fairly high-scoring in my opinion. I'm going to go for another solid 3-1 away win to Manchester City, because they got to start picking up some points. If Arsenal didn't throw away their 2-goal lead against Watford, Arsenal would be in second place in the Premier League at this stage, which is absolutely crazy. So So Man City are going to have to win this one, and I believe they will have enough strength to do that. Now, the next game, it is definitely the game of the week. The Super Sunday, Manchester United up against Liverpool. And this is going to be a very tough game for Liverpool going to Old Trafford. There's the pressure in a sense of everyone almost expects Liverpool to win this game, which is not often the case when Liverpool travel to Old Trafford. They've won 8 out of 8 games in the Premier League, and Manchester United, on the other hand, have had their worst start to a season for I think about 30 years. So everything points towards a Liverpool win, which is why I think it's going to be made slightly more difficult. But Liverpool are so used to winning. They're so used to doing what's necessary to get the result that they need. I'm going to go for another very, very close game and hopefully more entertaining, because when Man United play the likes of Newcastle, it has been a very ugly game to watch. Even when they played Arsenal, both Man United and Arsenal in that game did not look pleasing on the eye. But I think Liverpool's better quality will force Man United to do something. Otherwise, they will get beat like 4-0. So it'll either be an absolute thrashing, or Man United will have to step up a bit closer to Liverpool's level and make it a more interesting game. Because you can't have a boring game like Man United Newcastle, Man United Arsenal when your opponent is Liverpool, because in that case you will just get absolutely stuffed. So I'm going to go for a Liverpool win here, but I think it's going to be close, because obviously the more Liverpool win, the more they go unbeaten 100%, the more pressure there is. But I feel like they're dealing with it very well at this point. They're winning games that arguably they shouldn't have won. You know, Chelsea, Leicester, Southampton, those 3 games, Liverpool got 9 points when arguably they could have got 3 or, 5 or something like that. So I think Liverpool will get the win. I'm going to go for a 2-1 scoreline to Liverpool. Now, the final game, Monday Night Football, is Sheffield United versus Arsenal. Now, this is going to be a tough one for Arsenal. They don't traditionally travel very well, and Sheffield United have been looking fairly solid. They've been a little bit unlucky in terms of their results, but they do look good, and they are at home. So I guess I'm going to go for a little bit of an upset here, and partly this is the Arsenal fan in me thinking, if I predict Arsenal not to win, and they do win, I've got the prediction wrong, but Arsenal win, so that's a plus. And then if Arsenal don't win, at least my prediction is somewhat correct, so I can take that from an Arsenal, failure, as it will. So I'm going to go for a draw in this game. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw between the two teams. Like I said, I'm hoping Arsenal win and prove me wrong, but I just feel like it's going well for Arsenal right now, especially with the results in the Europa League. They do have to rotate the squad to accommodate that, but I think they're as good as qualified in their group, to be honest. They look in a very strong position. So I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw in this one. But that is going to do it for this video and the Week 9 predictions. If you did enjoy it, like I said at the beginning, please leave a like on it, subscribe today, and turn on the bell so you don't miss another video. I've got UCL Game Week 3 predictions coming up in a few days, and leave your Week 9 predictions down in the comments, like I said, for a chance to be featured in the Week 10 episode of the Premier League predictions, which will be up on the channel in a week's time. So yeah, that does it from me, and I will catch you in the next video very soon.